example, imagine that you are asked to join a community program for recycling cans and bottles and paper, and you enjoy the freedom of just throwing everything together in the trash, but you stop and assess the consequences of everyone if everyone refused to recycle. Your assessment may cause you to join the program. And I equate this to people who throw shit on the ground, like whether it's their gum or their cigarettes or papers or things out the window. Oh my God, I remember with family member again, we're driving and they're just like threw their McDonald's wrappers outside the window. And I'm going, can you do that? Are you allowed to do that? No, you're not. That's littering, y'all. And if everyone did it, how bad would it be? And I remember one time I was eating an apple and I just threw it in the bushes. And my mom's like, oh, if everyone did that, do you know what that would like? The entire world would be just garbage. Like, you can't just throw stuff. I was like, oh, it biodegrades. Like, we're not playing that game. Like, get a freaking compost pile. All right. So anyway, just consider that when, universal consequences. If everyone did it, then ultimately what would be the consequence for it? And a lot of times it's usually not good. All right. So the new cases test. It asks you to consider whether your action is consistent with other actions that are in the same category. You choose the hardest case you can and see if you would act the same way in the case that you plan to act in this one. Okay? So if you would, then your decision is consistent with your principles. So, in other words, if you act one way and then it's inconsistent with your principles, should you do it? Probably not. I don't know. Depends on it depends on your principles, right? Like, are they ethical? Are you doing the right thing? So, anyway, is your action consistent with other actions that are in the same category? Okay, so an example would be you're deciding whether to vote to continue experiments that may be successful in finding cures for AIDS, but involve injecting animals with the HIV virus. Your principle is that cruelty to animals is not justified under any circumstance. To formulate a new, harder case, you might ask yourself if you would allow the research to be conducted if it would save your life or the life of your child. If you would, if you would, then you might reconsider your voting decision and reassess your principles, right? So then we have to go, ooh, what's the better decision here? So another example involves the issue of whether a photographer should turn over negatives to the police if it would help the detectives identify and prosecute murder suspects. All right. You may believe the freedom of the press cannot be compromised, and therefore the photographer should be able to keep the negatives out of the investigation. Using new cases test, imagine that someone you love dearly was the murder victim, right? And then these photographs are the link to catching the murderer. Would that knowledge change your value priorities in your conclusions in this test? So new cases principle or new cases test is kind of one of those like, oh, if it was the other way around and I was involved, what would I want? Okay. So the higher principles test. All right, and this is, remember, higher principles. This will also be on the quiz. It asks you to determine if the principle on which you are basing your action is consistent with a higher or more general principle that you accept. So, for example, let's say your roommates are not doing their share of the housework, so you were considering not doing your own. How many of y'all done that? Oh, anyway. So, however, because you value promise keeping and integrity, you realize that it's important to keep your part of the bargain, regardless of whether they are doing their part. Okay, you decide to keep doing your share and talk with them and keep their part of the agreement. Right. A lot of times, especially the higher principle test, if you end up trying to do what they're doing, I tell you what, it always ends up blowing up in your face anyway. All right, you might as well just keep your integrity, keep your side of the street clean, and just keep doing the next right thing, and then you don't have to deal with them bitching and moaning at you and using it against you, because they'll do it. How do I know? I don't know. I'm just kidding. Okay, rationalization. All right, rationalizations. You could actually use that last one to rationalize why y'all didn't do the dishes, right? Okay, rationalizations when we don't act ethically, When we don't act ethically, we often come up with rationalizations for our behavior. So you could say, normally you do the dishes, but you're like, because they didn't, I did it. And you're like, well, you're rationalizing why you didn't do dishes. So is that right? I don't know. That's not the best example, but you kind of get it. Okay. So a rationalization is a defense mechanism that underlies many others. Okay. It involves justifying or making sense of things that don't make sense and explaining things away that should be brought under examination. Okay. So we rationalize maybe things we shouldn't be doing. Okay. So on 51 and 52, we're going to go back to that. That's where we start with the whole list of the different types of rationalization. So, all right, the first one, if it's necessary, it's ethical. All right, so on this one, it's based on the false assumption that necessity breeds prosperity or propriety, sorry. In other words, because it's necessary, it needs to be done, right? That it's ethical. That's not true, because necessity is an interpretation, it's not a fact. A necessity is not like the truth, it's not the fact, it's just, right? It's an interpretation. But an actual necessity, okay, so say there is an actual necessity that does just because there's an actual necessity does not justify an unethical act. Let me rephrase that, okay? It leads to like the ends justify the means type of reasoning, and treating assigned tasks or desired goals as moral imperatives. Okay, so it's not if it's necessary, it's ethical, right? Stealing food for your family, because they need to eat, it doesn't negate the fact that it's still unethical to steal, right? Well, they needed to eat. Well, what you did was still unethical. Like, that's the main point there. So it sucks because you're like, well, my family needed to eat. You're like, what you did was still unethical. Like, you see how it becomes like kind of like a circular argument. Anywhoosies. All right, so if it's legal and permissible, it's proper. Do we not recall that not all laws are ethical? Okay, so if it's legal and permissible, it's proper. All right, we can talk about slavery on that one. That's not proper, y'all. That ain't proper in any way, shape, or form. So it substitutes legal requirements for personal moral judgment, okay? And it does not embrace a full range of ethical obligations, okay? So especially for those involved in upholding the public trust. We can argue that till our faces are blue. Ethical people often choose to do less than they are allowed to do, okay? Just because you're allowed to do it doesn't mean it's ethical, okay? So, again, ethical people often choose to do less than they are allowed to do and more than they are required to do, okay? Think about that for a little bit, all right? So, I was just doing it for you. I was just doing it for you. I was just stealing bread for you. It's still unethical. Now you're in jail. Now no one can provide for anyone. Good job, brah. Okay, so I was just doing it for you as a primary justification of white lies, okay? Or withholding important information in personal or professional relationships, especially performance reviews, right? So the dilemma is honesty and respect versus caring. Okay, so the danger violates the principles of respect for others. It implies a moral right to make decisions about one's own life based on true information. Okay, so it ignores underlying self-interests of a liar and underestimates uncertainty about other person's desires to be protected. Okay, most people would rather have unpleasant information than be deluded into believing something that isn't true. So the reality is a lot of people actually want to know the truth. They really want to know the truth. In fact, that's what America is fighting about right now, is they want to know the truth. What's the truth? Well, the truth is out there. The problem is when you're lied to so often in so many ways, whether it's, conspiracy theories or this or that or whatever, when you're lied to so often, at some point you don't even know what's left and what's right. If you've just been told the truth from the beginning, whatever that truth may be, even if it hurts, even if it's not what you want to hear, ultimately you end up going, oh, but it was the truth, and I hold it to that, and then I can just move on, whatever that might be. The idea is when we see something along the lines of, I was just doing it for you, you're also underscoring the fact that maybe there's some selfishness behind that, whether you don't want to get in trouble, maybe you gain from it in some way, shape, or form. It's this this idea is these lies become manipulation to the point where you're so manipulated, then the truth gets muddled in between. So anyway, the idea here is that I was just doing it for you is a rationalization behind selfish behavior, and that's pretty much what rationalizations really are for. All right. I was just fighting fire with fire. Oh, isn't that a fun one? All right, that's kind of like the whole dishes thing. I was just fighting fire with fire. I didn't do dishes because they didn't do dishes. And now there's no dishes and everything smells. Oh, God, stinky sinks. Okay. Based on false assumption that deceit, lying, promise breaking, etc., are justified if they are the same sort engaged in by those you're dealing with. So just because they did it doesn't mean you should be doing it. Okay. All right. And it doesn't hurt anyone. All right. That's our next one. It doesn't hurt anyone. It's a rationalization used to excuse misconduct based on the false assumption that one can violate ethical principles so long as there's no clear and immediate harm to others. There's always harm. Remember when we talk about there's no such thing as, what I said? I forgot what I said earlier. Something about freedoms. Freedom's not free. Something like that. Something always has to give. Okay, so it treats ethical obligations simply as factors to be considered in decision making rather than ground rules. Okay, the problem areas is asking for or giving special favors to family, friends, or politicians, disclosing non-public information to benefit others, using one's position for personal advantage, blah, blah, blah. You can imagine there's plenty of that going on now, even with vaccines, things, you name it. There's always someone somewhere it doesn't hurt anyone. It always hurts someone somewhere. If you have to use that line, you're probably hurting someone somewhere. Just a little heads up, okay? It can't be wrong if everyone's doing it. It can't be wrong if everyone's doing it. Oh, Lord. Save us from ourselves on that one, right? So it's a false safety in numbers declaration. It's a rationale that's fed by the tendency to uncritically adopt cultural, organizational, or occupational behavior systems as if they were ethical. So just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, right? So, and again, I bring up slavery as the quickest, easiest go-to in things that at one point, as a culture, as an organization, as an occupation, I was not a part of that, but there was an understanding that it was completely ethical to, enslave people and have them do our dirty work for us. Like that was a thing that at one point, people would say, it can't be wrong if everyone's doing it. At some point, you have to go back to your values and go, really though? Are you sure it's not hurting someone? Really? Okay. So these are things we have to consider, especially again, if we're saying these statements like, it can't be wrong if everyone's doing it. Well, usually there's, at some point you have to take responsibility for these statements. So, ooh, my thing's all stuck. What's going on over here? There we go. Sorry, I gotta. Technical glitches, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, here we go. I gotta go down a little bit. Okay, there we go. I like to have my little PowerPoint going. I feel safe with it. Okay, so it's okay if I don't gain personally. It's okay if I don't gain. I didn't gain anything from this, so how can it not be? How is it unethical? Well, let's be honest. Like again, if you have to make that rationale, there's that rationalization. Yeah, you're probably doing something wrong. The idea here is it's justifying improper conduct done for others, right? Just because you don't gain personally doesn't mean it's not unethical. Okay, or for institutional purpose on the false assumption that personal gain is the only test of impropriety. It's the only reason why you only do it because you say it doesn't hurt. You don't gain from it, so how could it be wrong, right? A related, more narrow excuse is that only behavior resulting in improper financial gain warrants ethical criticism. Okay, well, I didn't gain anything from it, so how come it's wrong? I was just helping someone. I was just doing it for you. Right? Okay. I've got it coming. Yeah. This one cracks me up. So persons who feel that they are overworked or underpaid rationalize that minor perks or acceptance of favors, discounts, or gratuities are nothing more than fair compensation. All right. It's also used to excuse all manner of personal policy abuses like sick pay, sick days. Darlings, I have worked with people who have abused those sick days. Well, they owe it to me. It's due to me. It is owed. I got it coming to me. Let's be honest with y'all. I'm going to tell you the truth about reality when you get out of school. Ain't nothing owed you. No one owes you shit. That's the truth. That's the real reality of the world. Doesn't matter how hard you work, there's always someone who's working harder than you. Doesn't matter how this or that, there's always someone who's above you. So, like, for us to say, oh, it's owed to me, nothing's owed to you. Absolutely nothing's owed to you. Unless it's a paycheck because you worked the hours, you know what I mean? Like, then that's a different conversation. But we live in a world of people who are entitled. There's so much entitlement in this world that I see. No offense, I see it a lot in students. In working retail, I've seen it a lot from customers. Like, a lot of people feel like things are owed to them. I've got it coming to me because I blah blah blah. There's always some statement. And to be honest with you, like, if you're trying to do like immoral things, you're trying to cheat the system because you think it's owed to you, well, you know, you're still doing unethical things. So, ta-da. Okay, so the last one on this one is the idea that, you know, I can still be objective. I can do immoral things, and I'm objective over this one. So it ignores the fact that a loss of objectivity always prevents perception of the loss of objectivity. Sorry. Also underestimates the subtle ways in which gratitude, friendship, anticipation of future favors, hint, hint, you're going to get some friendships out of this, you're going to get some favors out of this. I can still be objective, right? They believe that it will in no way affect your judgment. You don't think that's going to affect your judgment? Tell me that again, right? All right. So would the benefit still be provided if you were in no position to help the provider in any way? All right. So questions to ask yourself. So underneath that on page 53, page 53 has some really good common rationalizations. I don't get paid what I think I'm worth. So this is a good one. I actually really like these. So I'm going to give these as a great example. So the first one is if it's necessary, it's ethical. I need to have 3 years experience to get this job. So I'll put that on my resume. All right. Even though I only have 2 years. So, all right, you need 3, you put 2. Is that ethical? You lied. So I'm going to say no. Okay. If it's legal and permissible, it's proper. An example is, since my parents are divorced, my mom claims me on her income tax. Even though my dad makes a huge salary and also supports me, the state only counts my mom's salary in figuring out my college funding. So the state pays for my entire tuition, okay, room and board. It's probably not fair to take the money that other students need, but it's the law, okay? Many people use the law to their benefit, especially business owners. Hey, if it's there for you, right? Why the hell not? I don't know. I don't have a business, so I couldn't tell you. But, I mean, we got to ask ourselves morally, are we following these, you know, are we making rationalizations for the decisions we're making? I was just doing it for you. An example is, I didn't tell you that your boyfriend or girlfriend was cheating on you because I didn't want to make you feel bad. Okay, there's an example there. I was just fighting fire with fire. My roommate took my jacket without asking, so I'm taking his camera. I'm pretty sure I've done this somewhere down the line, right? I'm a sister, so I'm sure I've definitely done that with my brothers. It doesn't hurt anyone. My sister wrote an essay for the outline class, but that doesn't hurt anyone else. Sorry, my sister wrote my essay for the outline class, but doesn't hurt anyone else. Okay. You are using your sister, but whatever. It can't be wrong. Everyone's doing it. Lots of people are leaving work early, so why shouldn't I? Right? Everyone's doing it. All right. It's okay if I don't gain personally. Example is when my shift was over, I took some pizzas from the restaurant to give to some kids who were playing on the street. Right? So I just took some pizzas from the restaurant. No big deal. Okay. It's a big restaurant. It's huge. It's round table. They make so much money. It's silly. It's just a couple pizzas. Is that ethical? All right. and I've got it coming. All right. I don't get paid what I think I'm worth. Sorry, I repeated this one. So I spend time at work catching up on my email. Okay. All right. So I can't. I can still be objective. It's okay for me to receive expensive gifts from people in my district. That won't affect how I vote on their concerns. Yeah. Right. Okay, so we're getting ready to finish up over here. We're going to talk about the last thing here. Stephen Toulmin's method of argument, which is fantastic. He was the first guy. Oops, little thingy here. He was the first guy since Aristotle to analyze an argument. Okay, Aristotle was born in 384 BC, mind you, and he invented the three corners of the argument, syllogisms, fallacies, and all that. But Toulmin was born in 1922. That's a huge gap in between, and he made the first major changes. In other words, there's a long time in between him versus Aristotle when it comes to understanding the argument. Okay, so Toulmin came up with the three terms: claim, qualifier, and warrant. So let's click through here. Now, a claim is statements of an individual's beliefs or stand upon an issue, right? So we're making a claim, we're making a statement. Okay, so the reasons are direct statements that provide evidence for the claim. We have our claim, and then we have our reasons for that claim, and those reasons are evidence. All right. Warrants are those unstated but necessary links between reasons and claims, and it's the glue that attaches the reasons to the claims. So to have a claim and a reason, you have to have that thing in between that says, how do these two work together? So let's see. So there's a few examples on page 53. Let's get there. But one thing that I do want to do as an example is we're going to do a couple fairy tales. And I'd like you to take a few minutes after this and maybe just kind of see, where do you see some claims, some reason, and some warrants for why some of these fairy tale characters have done what they've done. I really like doing this in class, but for now we're just going to do it. I don't know. Do it with your cat. He's gone. He got over it. Okay. I've been doing this a while. Okay, so we're going to try first with the story of Goldilocks. We're going to figure out what her claim is, what are her reasons, and what are some warrants for that. So the first one, let's see here. Goldilocks has trespassed into the three bears' home. All right. So Goldilocks, I need to ask you. Imagine I'm talking to Goldilocks over here. Goldilocks, I have to ask you, what were you thinking? And she goes, I am allowed to trespass. Goldilocks is now telling me she's allowed to trespass. I am allowed to trespass. And I would like to ask Goldie, can you give me some reasons why that is the case? And she says, because I was hungry and tired. So I was hungry and tired, so I trespassed. And I want to say, all right, my dear, can you give me some warrants to that? Like, how did these two come together? And she goes, in order to survive, you need to eat and sleep. So my trespassing was warranted because it was a matter of survival. So I ate their food and I slept in their beds. Case closed, I'm done. Where's my coffee? All right, so I don't know Goldilocks. That might have been a terrible rendition of who she might be. But the point here is, what are her claims? She claims that, she was allowed to trespass. She was totally justified because her reasonings being she needed to eat, she needed to sleep, because that's what you need to survive. So that's Goldilocks' argument. I'm not saying it's the best argument. I'm just saying that's what she's saying. Okay? So go ahead through and you can see at the very end of this, 98